4 things. What are the 4 things that culture
Cultivates.
Communicates.
Cultivates.
communicates? Cultivates.
Communicates.
Reproduces.
Orients, reproduces.
Whoa! Yeah, yo!
Yeah, get this down.
After 4 weeks, we got it. We remembered 1 a week.
So culture communicates. It communicates this kind of vision of life. It orients. It gives us a sense of direction. It reproduces. So it helps to spread beliefs and values and ideas and practices from one group to another. And then ultimately, culture cultivates. It is like spiritual formation. So there's a method of interpretation that we try to use to culturally exegete stuff. Does anybody remember what that 3-level exegesis?
Behind, in front.
Boom.
Nice, Trav.
Boom.
Thanks, Mo.
Yeah. And then we have some guidelines that we go by to try to do this. We try to comprehend a cultural text before you interpret it. Identify what a cultural text is doing and what it's saying. Consider the world behind, of, and front. Determine the power served by the particular text. Seek its kind of meta-narrative or root metaphor. Be comprehensive. Give thick descriptions of it, so don't reduce it by saying it sucks or it's a children's book or I don't care about it. See what it tries to say about what it means to be human, what faith it's kind of expressing, and then eventually we get to the part where we try to locate it within the biblical narrative or within our own faith experience. So, luckily, tonight we have both Mo and Drew to walk us through Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So, both and just share with us a little bit about the background of that book or that series. Share with us that particular book and what might be going on, and then why it has significant meaning to you.
Well, it was a dark night, and Professor Dumbledore was running a little bit late. He was going to the Dursley's house to lay a baby on a doorstep. His baby was Harry Potter. His parents had been murdered by the evil Dark Lord known as Lord Voldemort. Also known as
Don't you say it.
Yeah, or he must not be named. And then Harry grows up with his aunt and uncle, you know, the traditional mean step-parents storyline. And then on his 13th birthday, or 12th birthday, I don't even know, he finds out he's a wizard.
I think it's 10th.
10th? Sure, I don't know.
I just read it last night.
Yeah, he just read it.
I think it is the 10th.
Well, he finds out, that makes sense because there's 7 years of Hogwarts, yeah. Okay, and he finds out he's a wizard. He gets to go to this great wizarding school. Not only does he find out he's a wizard, he finds out he's like the most famous wizard because Lord Voldemort, he must not be named, tried to kill him also. And the killing curse bounced off Harry and gave him this big scar on his forehead that looks like a lightning bolt. So everybody recognizes him and they all think he's the only person who ever survived. Anyway, he goes to school, makes friends, you know, trials of childhood, and Lord Voldemort's in the woods drinking unicorn blood because it helps him stay alive, and he has to do a series of tasks towards the end of the book to defeat him. Kind of, but not really.
And that starts the series of Harold Potter.
Harry's.
Potterus.
Mo, you need to add anything about the Sorcerer's Stone?
Yeah, not the Sorcerer's Stone. Drew gave a pretty good summary of it. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing with me is that the Sorcerer's Stone, like the first book, is like it's kind of like the lightest in terms of like what they have to deal with. Like it just gets like heavier and heavier, and like the themes are deeper and deeper as the series goes on. So I don't know. In terms of like exegetical purposes, the first book may not be the most like, I guess, I don't know, eye-opening, but it's you know, you got to start somewhere. So I guess that's all I'd add to
That was the first one that took the world by storm.
It was. Actually, it didn't, because it was published in like 97, and they didn't become like huge until about 2001.
Never mind.
It's
But
okay.
yeah, for all
That's when the movie came out, though, right?
no, because the first 3 books were out really before they.
No, they got big in like '99 because I remember I was in 4th grade.
Okay.
Oh my god, I graduated high school. Anyway.
But like the first huge thing where people went and stayed up all night for the books was like the 4th book.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But for like the whole series, all 7 books, I would say one of the biggest themes is like death and dying, how you cope with death and dying. But like Morgan said for like the first book, not so much.
So for you two, why bring this as a cultural text for you personally?
Well, so my lovely dog Kobe died.
What?
Yeah.
No,
Died about a week or 2 ago.
You did?
2 weeks ago,
I
yeah.
was honestly talking about Kobe today to someone about him and his diaper. That makes me sad.
Kobe was like 15 years old, and he's blind in both eyes. He just like slept all day and ate all the time. Anyway, his time came, and I buried him in the backyard. And as I was burying him, I thought to myself, this is ridiculous that I'm thinking of this. But I was like, I feel like Harry Potter digging a grave for Tommy. Which happened in the 7th book. And I was like, oh my gosh. But immediately I thought, wow, look how much like cultural significance this has had on me. If that's like what my mind went to.
Yeah.
Which I recognize it's ridiculous that my mind went to that. But I think it's testament to like how I grew up with it as my childhood.
In the last 15 years of like when the books have been around.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess to add on to that, I don't know, for me, I've always thought Harry Potter is really interesting in terms of like cultural presence, just because of how much, or especially in the South, it was such like kind of a lightning rod. It was a very polarizing book. I mean, there's so many people like, I'm sure Imlot at SBC, now North Point Christian School, was Harry Potter like banned?
Well, actually, someone donated the first Harry Potter book to the library while I was in middle school / high school. So around that time, like 98, 99, and like a couple of months later, it was pulled off the shelves because it was so controversial, it being about witchcraft and wizardry, that we weren't allowed to check it out anymore.
Yeah, so things like that were happening, like, or I was hearing about things like that, and at the same time, as I kept, like, as you kept going through the series, I don't know, the things that I thought were interesting, how much of a theme love was. I mean, Drew talked about death and dying, and that is a really big theme because, I don't know, I mean, there's so many people that die, and Harry having to deal with all these people, and then, like, thinking about his parents, too, all this stuff, but at the same time, like, love is like the thing that keeps everything together. So on the surface, all these people were rejecting Harry Potter as this kind of like pagan book celebrating witchcraft and wizardry and all this like stuff that, oh my god, it's like the devil's work. But at the same time, like if you kind of looked beneath the surface, you'd see this enduring theme of love conquering everything. And like in the end, in the 7th book, like that's why Voldemort, spoiler alert, that's why he can't kill Harry and like get rid of him completely, because Harry has love and Voldemort doesn't. So I don't know, I've always thought that thing was like the most interesting aspect of the whole series and as a cultural phenomenon.
All right, anybody else have thoughts?
I was just sorry, am
Go
I
ahead, too. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the fact that there's a death and resurrection of the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like something I've read once before.
Yeah, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that the author, she had to use like a pen name because it was geared towards young boys. So instead of going by her real name, like she went with initials instead. And that happens for a lot of female writers. So that's cool to know, I think.
And even the book she came out with a few months ago, maybe a year ago now, under a pen name, she thought it was like she loved that she didn't have to do any marketing for it or have people have expectations that she would have because she is, but she did choose a male name.
Oh, really?
And she didn't even have a middle initial. They like probably just made her choose one.
Just to kind of go off what Morgan said, this is more about the series as a whole, and actually this is speaking more, I guess, towards the movies. I've read the first book. I haven't read the whole series, but at least the way they portrayed in the movies, which I know is not necessarily like the book, but just kind of going off his point, as the movies progress, it becomes less about the magic and witchcraft than about kind of those themes that Morgan said. Because like the first movie, it's like, oh, or in the first book, you know, like they get there and they learn how to Wingardium Leviosa, you know, like make things float and, you know, change frogs into candy or whatever, and or vice versa, whatever. And so it's more about that and kind of like that, you know, idea. But then at least in the movies and I guess in the books, I don't know, I could be wrong about that, but it's less focused on the actual tricks and wizardry that they pull off and more about kind of those darker themes and just overcoming that. Because it's not because even at the end, you know, it's not because Harry is a better magician or wizard that he's able to defeat Voldemort. It's because he has love. So that's like, you know, that kind of flips the whole being a wonderful wizard in the sense of I'm a wizard and can do magic kind of upside down.
Mm-hmm. And another obvious thing too, like the two of the big contrasting themes, it's like light and darkness. You see those a lot contrasting against each other, and so that's another thing that we've all seen a lot of somewhere else, as Taylor was talking about. So I don't know, those are a couple other things that stuck out to me.
One thing I was thinking about that I didn't realize until I met George was that, for example, the first book, the Sorcerer's Stone, in Australia or in England, it's the Philosopher's Stone, and like they renamed the title, a lot of the words, and even did some of the movie double takes just for two different groups that speak the same language. I think that's interesting because it's also, you know, dubbed in other languages or rewritten for however many languages, and it makes you think about what they changed to fit better in that culture.
Well, if any of you are interested, I ordered the 8-pack DVD thing, and I got it from Amazon, and whenever they shipped it to me, there was a note in the box that said, "Hey, I decided to pack the UK version in your box because I think it's more interesting. So here you go. It's not that different, but if you don't like it, you can send it back." I was like, okay. So I have the UK version, complete with the Philosopher's Stone on the title.
Very nice.
I know, it's vintage.
That person must really feel strongly about that.
The box was too much.
Yeah, what do you think of the ripoff?
Yeah.
Well, I have no kind of working knowledge of the rest of the series, so I'm just dealing with the stuff that I read 5 hours yesterday. Yeah, by the way, when you said, oh, you're going to read the first couple pages, you're just going to knock it out, I read it all last night. Just
You liked it, didn't you?
I did. So things that stood out to me, obviously right off the top, the, whatever you call them, the adopted parents, the Dursleys, they suck. That was my first very theological thought that I had of them. But like when I read through the whole book, I like the natural friendships that take place between like Harry and Ron and Hermione and Neville and people like that. How it just kind of happens naturally, and though Harry is like really concerned about fitting in and stuff, he immediately finds that one person who, you know, has the legacies in front of him, and so he's kind of feeling the same way, and they just naturally just kind of buddy up. And then Hermione kind of comes in towards the end of the book as they, you know, don't like each other, and then they end up realizing that they really do all like each other. I thought that was cool. I really liked their friendship and seeing how that blossomed. And it reminds me of friendships I have, like when I was a kid, like how I just became friends with people it was just random occurrence. Like wrote one of my best friends. I just met him playing football for the first time in 7th grade, and we were like inseparable the rest of the time. It just so happened I had never talked to him, never met him, but we were on the field together one time, and I think I cracked a joke, or he cracked a joke, and it just that's how it happened. You know, I have a good friend who I'm still friends with who we got beat up on the school bus together, and that's how we became friends. We got picked on.
Traumatic experiences often bring.
Yeah. So, it's cool to see that, you know, play out in the book. Any other stuff from the book that you think of that?
I think one interesting thing in the first book that doesn't come up as much later on is that Harry's kind of tempted by the dark side, so to speak, by like the Malfoys trying to make friends with him early on, and I guess it comes up more later on as well with Voldemort trying to tell Harry he's got this thing inside of him, he should join him, and that sort of idea. But it's interesting to compare that to other cultural texts. For example, Star Wars, where you have a similar thing of the like Anakin Skywalker, this powerful kid who undergoes loss and pain, and then he turns evil, and in Harry Potter he kind of has to resist that and fight for what he believes is right.
I think that's interesting. Going off that, you know how like the Malfoys are trying to make friends with him, and I think it's pretty cool that idea of the Sorting Hat. How like when he was sitting under there, like the Sorting Hat was kind of talking to him about like, oh, I think you'd be good at Slytherin, and then like Harry was like, I really want to be in Gryffindor, I really want, and then that, you know, he winds up being Gryffindor. You find out like later in the book that really like it's just kind of like what you want to be like is what the hat picks you to be. And I think that's kind of cool because you can think about that like in life, because really, you know, you get to choose who you're going to be and like what kind of, you know, kind of qualities you're going to have. And the other thing I was going to say is about like the loyalties of the different houses, about, you know, how they're unique and their different strengths and how they all come together to be, you know, story.
I really feel like J.K. Rowling does a really good job of showing us the world of magic. Like, with Harry, we get to learn all the things that go on in this world. Like, with Harry, we get to learn what Quidditch is. We get to learn what the subjects are and what Hogwarts is. So I think she does a really good job of opening up that world. She shows us all these new things that you can do, but also in this world, she shows you the limitations within that world. I think that's what makes it more realistic and more likable, is that it's not just an anything goes, but it's like a real world, that even in the wizarding world, there are limitations.
I think it's really cool how Harry is so humble. You know, like he's got all these gifts and all, you know, all this money and all this, you know, support and all these fans. But like I think that's one thing that makes the series so popular is how like humble he is and how real he is and how, you know, he's, you know, he has faults just like everybody else, and you know, that's kind of, you know, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, another thing, Mo kind of brought up the fact that maybe the later books kind of deal with heavier things, but I felt like that was pretty heavy for a children's book. I mean, right off the bat, his parents died of murder, and then basically he's in a domestic abuse relationship for years. Like, the brother's beating him up, and the father's, I forget, what is the stick that he gets poked with? What is that called again?
Oh, the school.
School, yeah.
I can't think of it. God.
So he's getting bullied at school. He's, you know, he's basically made to sleep in a, you know, under the stairs, I guess, or something like that, like in a closet, until he finally gets to the, you know, moved up to the room eventually. But, you know, he's dealing with abuse, mental and physical, and his parents' death, which is, you know, not talked about. The neglect of the family that he's with. There's no pictures of him at all. There's no pictures of his family. I don't think he ever saw a picture of his family until he stepped in front of that mirror at Hogwarts. So,
I wonder
what kind of impact that has on a kid who's
Yeah.
experiencing something to that degree, like neglect or monsters and things. Just a thought.
I mean, Harry. I mean, he's pretty brave. I mean, for dealing with all the stuff that he dealt with, I felt like he's pretty well adjusted. You know, he goes from being completely ignored to being the most famous
Especially how
face.
new it is.
Yeah, and he kind of rolls with it pretty well.
I think it also helps he's in a controlled environment, though, like the school. If he just had free reign with all that money.
A different movie.
I do think, though, often as a kid, wishing that my owl would come with my letter and write in Hogwarts. But I love those books, and whenever I read them, I'm like, these are so cool, man. I wish I could be a part of these books. And then it kind of hits me, I'm like, no, I don't. Why would I want to be Harry Potter? I mean, people are trying to kill him. He goes through so many experiences. I was like, this life is pretty good. I don't know. I was thinking about that. Like, oh, I want to beat him so bad, but that sounds horrible.
He's every day is like so exciting, like all the stuff he does. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to be the Seeker in Quidditch.
That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
I think too.
It's got to hurt your crotch, though, right? Right on a broom.
Yeah.
They got broom pads.
Broom pads.
It's like right
Yeah, it's a
I think
spell.
it was the big butt seats that you can get to try to help out with
Yeah.
comfort.
I think too, like, I know at one point in the series, I'm not sure, I can't remember if it happens in the first book, he kind of questions why he survived, kind of that idea, and I think that that's something that people, like people who a lot of, like, they get in a car wreck or something, and they're the only person that lives in the car, like they have that, like why was I the one that lived, or why was I the one that Voldemort couldn't kill, or, like my parents had love, but, they didn't live, kind of thing like that. I feel like that's a pretty real thought process that people have when stuff like that happens too. And I'm not sure he deals with that too much, but I know there are times in the series as a whole where he has that struggle.
Any other thoughts about Harry Potter?
Harry Potter.
I thought it was neat, which somebody brought up the mirror. I think that's kind of cool because, like, at the end when Voldemort was trying to get the stone and, like, Quirrell, I guess, was attached to him somehow, and, like, he was like, he couldn't figure out how to get the stone out, and then Harry came and he was able to get it, in his pocket. He found out that the only reason he got it was because he was, like, doing it for a good reason. He wasn't trying to use it. He was just trying to find it and use it for the greater good. So I thought that was kind of neat, like the idea behind all that and like how that worked. That's pretty cool.
I'd like to play Wizard Chess.
Ooh.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, I like how lots of the kids, especially the ones that Harry kind of groups up with and hangs out with, they're all heroes in their own way, and they all get their little moments within a book. I think that's really cool. Like, you don't have to be Harry to be a hero within that story. Like, you can pick any character and feel like you can relate to that. And I like that a lot. So themes, I heard people talk about death and dying and love and light and darkness. Are the other themes that you can think of that come up?
I think lots of it's a coming of age story. So you get that theme of like maturity coming into adulthood.
I think we also kind of touched a little bit on your own choices shaping who you are versus fate throwing things at you.
I also think there's not like necessarily in a negative way, but it promotes a lot of like, if you're good, then something good will happen to you in a way. Like thinking about the stone thing, like he ends up with the stone because he wants it for the right reasons and he wants to use it for good. And then there's like in the second book, he gets this sword of Gryffindor to kill the snake. Basilisk, yeah. because of some other reason, you know, like another reason like that, like he wanted it out of the right reasons or he did something good for somebody else. And so it kind of, you know, like a lot of the times, overall it shows the fact that like good conquers evil, but at the same time it kind of shows that, you know, maybe that's not necessarily always the case. So like it's not always like reality that the person who wants it most is going to end up getting it, or that does it for the right reasons is going to get it, or something. Like it kind of, that's more of a struggle, I think, but it does kind of promote that idea a little bit.
And I think that culminates at the end of the series where Voldemort spent his whole life trying to conquer death, literally, and then when Harry gathers all the Deathly Hallows together, he's able to conquer death, and that it no longer has a hold over him because there's no longer fear of death. And that was conquering death, was being able to freely go to your death with no fear. So it's kind of not what you would expect. Right. It's the person that doesn't want it, I guess.
I can't remember the exact quote at all, but towards the end, you know, after Harry gets the stone and he wakes up and Dumbledore comes to visit him and they have like this conversation, kind of wraps up a little bit about his adventures, and he starts to ask him questions, and Dumbledore kind of starts to give him a little more insight into what's been going on and stuff like that. I thought that was a really interesting section, and some of the stuff that comes out of Dumbledore's mouth and what he says to Harry, I thought was pretty deep for a children's series. You know, I think there's lots of opportunities here to explore those themes a little bit more. I wish I would have wrote down the actual quotes, but it was like
it was 3 in the morning.
It was 3:30.
I think it's also really cool how Harry gets to meet people that knew his parents, and he never got to meet his parents, and so he gets to find out about them a little bit away. And it's similar for me. It's cool when I hear something about my dad from somebody maybe worked with him or something. They knew another side of him that I never knew of him, because for me he was a parent rather than like a coworker or a friend or a colleague or something like that. So it's always cool to hear different perspectives.
Anything else about the book or the themes that come out of it?
I think one theme that I was thinking about was, it seems like a lot of times, like for that trio of, you know, Harry, Hermione, and Ron to like accomplish their goal, they kind of have to like think outside the box, and they have to like sometimes, you know, break what the rules are of the school to like get things done and, you know, be a hero. Like when they were doing all the investigating, they were supposed to go on the air with the Chamber of Secrets, and then when they like slipped off and like, you know, went in there, they weren't like supposed to do that, but then they did it and like really helped them. That's good. And that's kind of a theme throughout the whole series, like they do that. You know, it's kind of interesting.
I find it interesting when we talk about it as a children's book. Like, what does that mean? How it was written, or what was got at it. And I think it's neat talking with this group because we were younger when except for you last night. When we were starting.
Well, I was younger last night when I read it.
But I just mean like,
older.
When I read it, I don't remember thinking like, oh, I want to read this because this is a hit children's book.
All right.
Like the children aspect, or nor was I thinking really deeply about it. So it's interesting to reflect on it several years later. Oh, I remember all that happened, but I didn't think of it that way. Or, yeah, what if that something, I could relate to something like you were saying. What if a child had an experience like that? I bet I would have read it completely differently.
I think that's why, for those of you who grew up with it, I think it's why it was such a powerful thing. Like Morgan was talking about how you kind of if you were growing up at the time, you like grow up with a book.
Yeah, like they're the
So like it's kind of
the same
like
age as we were.
you know you like your point is you may not be when you're like reading the first one as like a oh were you Mo when the first one came out?
If it was like 99, then I would have been 9-ish
Yeah,
when I started reading it. I was in like 4th or 5th grade.
So if you're like 9 years old reading that book, you're probably not thinking about any themes, you know, but it's cool because it's like, you know, it's just an interesting book. But then as you get older and start experiencing things, the book starts experiencing those things too, and it kind of means more. So I think that's why it was such a powerful thing for those who grew up with it because of that reason, because you know, you just experienced what the book was telling you, basically. You're like, oh yeah. It's good stuff, man, HP.
It is kind of ridiculous, though, how it's like, this is a 10-year-old boy doing, like, I don't know, lots of literature, you get these children doing things that children don't do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's supposed to be like so we can identify with them as children reading this book, or if it's just like the idea of something kind of unexpected.
Well, I think when you're doing formation of children, one of the things you would like for them to get early on is for the fact that they are capable of doing much more. That they have a significance right now. You don't have to be an adult to be a hero or to be significant or have worth. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's a theme right there. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's a big, just you hearing it. I mean, like that's obviously a big part of the book. Now that you say it. Like,
Well, you see it a lot in scripture too, you know, like from unexpected places. And if any of you watch Game of Thrones, I'm a Game of Thrones fan, but you see it in Game of Thrones as well.
Yeah. I think sometimes, especially, you know, if we were taking this now and moving it into our Christian bubble a little bit, churches tend to dumb down stuff for kids within Scripture when there's not a need to do that. And then when they get older, they have to almost unlearn what they've learned and relearn it again through a deeper lens when there was no need for that to begin with, because we think kids can't handle it. Well, I think that's one of those things like Harry Potter kind of shows you. I think kids are ready for things on a different level because they experience things like that when they are kids. Like they experience death and they experience bullying and they experience abuse and they experience the highs of friendships and relationships and love, and you know they notice those things, but sometimes we think they don't, and so we have to get the felt board out and show them Noah's Ark and make sure that they don't. You know, they just know about the pretty animals, you know, marching in the boat and stuff. So I think that's one of the things for me when I think about reading this book, and if I was a kid reading it, no, I might not have been thinking analytically like I am now, but I think one of the reasons it probably was such a huge thing is because kids were dealing with lots of these themes and understanding them a little bit more than we probably give them credit to little kids. You know, they think about more than boogers and farts.
earwax, jelly.
Well, I am thankful that Drew and Mo and the rest of you suggested Harry Potter because I did enjoy reading the first book, so I'm sure that I'll read more of them. Start dressing like Harry Potter.
I hope so.
All right. So Anna, Wesley, you brought to us the Book of Mormon, and so I just wanted you to kind of share with us as much as you could. I know that you haven't seen it, so maybe just share what you know about it and why it interests you.
Okay. Well, this show is written by Trey Parker, Robert Lopez, and Matt Stone. So two of those guys are the guys who do South Park, and the guy that's in the middle, he's written music. He did like Avenue Q, which is another musical, and it has puppets in it. And it
probably not Sesame Street.
No.
like Sesame. It's like South Park meets Sesame.
Adult Sesame Street.
Yeah. So if you like the Book of Mormon, check that out. The show premiered in 2011, and it won a lot of Tonys. And one of the Tonys that it won was Best Musical. And it's about Mormons, and it's particularly about two Mormons who go on their mission. They're about 19 years old, and they go on their mission, and they're selected to go to Uganda. And there in Uganda, they're not met quite as warmly as they had hoped. So I think one thing that we really like about it is we really like musicals. I'm really into theater, and Wesley is really into music. Mm-hmm. And so this is the place where those two things meet. Like, literally, they meet together. And
this is why we're married.
Yeah. We met at a musical, so.
Literally, we did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What musical?
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a napkin. Wesley did music, so that was cool. And what I really like about this show is that it's really well done. Like, the writers are really informed about the Mormon faith. And they wrote a great show. They've got really good, solid characters, and the music, like lyrics and as far as the composition, it's really well put together. So for us, we really like it because it's well done. It's not just because we enjoy it, but because we appreciate the art that went into it. And so that's why we picked to go see it this year.
Yeah, I get one thing again that kind of talk about what Anna does is, of course, I'm a music person. Lyrics are not my forte when it comes to memorizing, and so I listen to a lot of music, and I have a very good ear when it comes to, like, I can tell you what key the song is and different things, like what instruments are being played. And I think one thing that really I was drawn to this musical is the fact that the music there's a lot of variety in it, and it's all very catchy. Like, to me, like, I never, like, when I'm listening to the soundtrack, I don't go, yeah, this isn't really a good song, I'm going to skip that one. Like, I'm like, man, this music is so good, it's well written, very well orchestrated, especially for this time. And I really enjoy the fact that they give us that variety and that it's very catchy.
All right.
Yeah. Anybody listen to any of it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I watched the whole thing.
Okay.
Anybody have any thoughts initially, like just about songs and themes and stuff like that?
Well, just going off kind of what Wesley was talking about, I'm more kind of along the music line as well. And one of the songs I really liked was the Hello song, just because there's a lot of moving pieces in it. Like, at one point, you know, they're just all kind of, they sing in unison and then they'll break off, and some people are going ding dong, and some people are saying, hey, Jesus Christ, or, you know, just randomly, like, interspersed, but it really works really well. And so, like, I was just, you know, like, from that standpoint, kind of what he was talking about, I enjoyed how easy it flowed, at least with that song, but, like, how probably complicated that was to kind of think in your head, like think up in your head. So that was a song that I really liked, that stood out to me.
I think it's funny, Travis, that you talk about that, because one thing Anna and I talked about when listening to the soundtrack was that's one of the first songs that they open up with. And I don't know about you guys, but my only occurrences with Mormons is we know that they come to people's houses and they ring their doorbells and they're like, hey, do you want to talk about Jesus Christ? And we only see them when they're riding their bicycles on the streets and stuff like that. So I think it's really neat at the fact that the writers begin introducing the musical the way that most people who are, say, not Mormon know kind of how Mormon are.
Yeah, and kind of like where the story ends for most people. Like it had, you know, like that one link y'all put up, I think, of their performance at the Tonys, wherever they have people like shutting doors in their face. Like that's where their experience with Mormons ends, is whenever they get that doorbell ring and then they just shut the door. So it's kind of it is a clever way to start it, kind of by being like, well, but look, there's more. than just you shutting your door and then they're gone kind of thing. So I agree.
So I listened to the soundtrack of the Book of Mormon at work. And,
Nathan!
I said headphones.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I was caught off guard by some of the lyrics. Like it was hilarious, but at some points in time, I was like, "Ooh, dang, that's pretty harsh." But yeah, I thought the orchestration was really good. You know, and like y'all were talking about, the variety is just, you know, it's not all the same thing. And I appreciated that about it.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, well, what I like about how they did this show, it's like these three guys got together and said everything about Mormonism that everybody's thinking, but they don't want to say. You know, and I think there are times that they really use that crudeness to bring out a good contrast. Because on one side you have these two Mormon guys, and they're really clean cut, they don't even cuss, and then they're right next to these people who are living with AIDS and in the midst of a famine. And I think it really shows off their characters really well with that contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of moving through some of the songs, and like I said, I watched it, so I don't want to talk too much about the play itself of it. But it really held up a mirror not to just Mormonism. It really held up a mirror to religion when it comes to where our faith and what matters about our faith, and then also how does it translate into a world that's different from the world in which you were brought up in. So lots of people, for instance, if you're Mormon, Utah is a big place. Utah is much different. The problems are much different than northern Uganda.
Yeah.
And I think you see that right at the beginning when they show up and, you know, the African people start singing their Hasi Diga Balwe or whatever. And they get into that idea of, you know, we've got a lot of crap going on here, and we hadn't seen God show up for this stuff. So you know what? Forget him.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most vulgar of the songs, obviously. But to me, I felt like it really talked about the horrors of Africa and the anger probably that exists within people who have had missionaries come from all different kinds of faiths and tell them their God's going to pull them out and save them, and yet here they are still stuck in the situations that they're stuck in, still finding themselves within it. And so I really thought, just listen to the songs in general, it really brought up a mirror to all faith. And I know that you had talked about last week, Anna, that he had said that this was a love letter, or an atheist love letter to religion. And I watched a video that talked a little bit about that, and Trey Parker said that that's not what he thinks about it. He said that was more Matt's view, and the guy asked, well, so you're not an atheist? And he's like, I don't know what I am. He's like, but I'm not going to claim that as my default or whatever. I thought that was interesting. But anyway, yeah, I really thought that just thinking about that theme as far as how much does our belief really matter when people are dealing with the things that they're dealing with, and how does it translate into an actual practical setting? You know, believe all that we want, but does it really help people? Does it really change things? Does it matter?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Book of Mormon, but I watched South Park since I was a little kid for some reason. And
explains a lot.
Yeah. I so you see the movie when it came out. I was 6 or 7. But anyways, I always thought they were geniuses of just satire of current events in the U.S. And I've always appreciated that about it. I mean, I haven't seen that play, but I always thought they were very good at bringing in a new perspective on what we consider reality. how ridiculous things are.
Again, I'm kind of following from that. I've seen a lot more of South Park than I have in the Book of Mormon, but in this context, having people talk about religion in a humorous way is, I think, something really important, because it's so easy to get stuck into your, this is what I believe in, you believe, you're different, you believe, and you fight about the differences. That if you're able to sit back and laugh at some of the aspects of it, it can actually help create a dialogue, help people move forward rather than get at each other's throats.
That kind of reminds me of it's a quote by George Bernard Shaw, but it's something along the lines of, like, if you're going to tell people the truth, you better make them laugh or else they'll kill you. It's the idea that people don't really want to hear the truth. It's difficult to hear. And so if you make them laugh, it gives them a new perspective and promotes dialogue and conversation.
Well, one of the hardest truths in life is someone is dead, and so humor is used a lot within funerals, to help with that process, obviously, to deal with that hard truth that this person is no longer here. I definitely think that it's much needed in those. So one of the songs that really stood out to me was "Turn It Off."
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons it resonated with me is because I know that there have been times in my life where I just wanted to avoid whatever I was dealing with, or avoid what I was how I was living, and I didn't want to actually deal with the fact that I was living that way or doing that thing, and so the easiest thing was to try to forget about it. And that song is all about, like, yeah, it's bad here in Africa, and there's terrible things, or, my cat died, or I think I'm gay, but I just turn that right off and don't think about it, I just move on with my faith, and I can live a better day, and a latter day, as they keep saying.
Yeah.
So, I really resonated with that song. I thought it was really poignant and had a lot of meaningful thoughts behind it, and how we deal with stuff by just completely trying to just get rid of it or avoid it, mask it.
And I don't even think it's just on an individual level. Like in our churches or in our groups, we tend to kind of think that way.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that big of a deal. Just get over it. It'll be fine. We have those kind of attitudes. It's just easier if we pretend like they don't exist than to actually deal with problems. And that's even on a community level.
Or we'll reduce it in some way. We'll try to, in some way, push it off as it's not that big of a deal. Instead of avoiding it, we just reduce it and say it doesn't matter. So that one really stood out to me. Spooky Mormon Hell Dream.
Yes.
That's another one that really stood out to me, because I remember being a child and laying in bed, and I heard about hell at some point or another, and having that dream about, I lied and then I died, and then I was standing before the judge, and then I went to this hot place that had fire in it and stuff like that. I remember having that dream.
Was that a dream or Judgment House?
No, and I also went to a judgment house. The difference is, in the judgment house, hell, this is how silly hell was. So if they really thought hell existed in the way that they thought that it existed, they should have done a better job. Because all hell was is we walked into this room, they had like a screen track playing on a CD player, and the room was pitch black dark, and then the heater turned up.
That sounds good.
Like, well, I could do this for sure. I mean, it's not that big of a deal.
Dude, man up.
Yeah, right? Man up. Like Jesus on the cross.
You tuned the screen like you used to the heat after a while.
Yeah, it's just, I was like, is this really? And then you walked into heaven, and heaven was like going to Botanic Gardens and the Jesus didn't blink. That was the main thing that I remember. He talked for 10 minutes and he did not blink once. And I was like, Jesus is kind of freaky. He didn't blink at all. And then two more songs, just that stood out to me. I Believe, and I Believe stood out because it's this idea that you can't doubt, you can't question, you got to believe it all, or it's nothing. It doesn't, there's no reason to have faith in God if you can't believe all the things that you've been taught. And then the completely overly sexualized baptism song.
Nathan, that's my favorite one.
I'm gonna do it. And the reason why it stood out to me is because it reminds me of Christian music in general. Really creepy sometimes about.
There's a South Park on that. Did you ever see it?
Uh-uh.
So Cartman makes a Christian rock band, and he says, all you do is you take love songs and replace the word baby with Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that baptized me. It really reminded me of some of those songs and how it gets a little creepy about how you're singing about Jesus and touching you and you touching him. And what are we talking about?
Or your love is extravagant.
Yeah, it's like that. What are you talking about?
And shit is intimate.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
I feel like moving. Oh, yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts on the songs that you heard or stuff that other stuff that stood out to you?
I think it shows, just kind of on a theme level, I think that things like this, and they happen a lot too, I think it shows a fascination with religion. Because even if one of these guys is atheist, even if they're not, not sure, whatever, I think the fact that, they decided to write a musical about a religion or thoughts about religion just kind of shows the fascination, even if you don't really believe necessarily in it. I think there's just a general fascination with belief. And I think that also comes into the humorous part, that I don't think anybody's religion really makes total, perfect, rational sense. And so some of it's just funny, trying to reconcile, like, one of the lines that stuck out to me in one of the songs was, and I think I mentioned it tonight, but how they were like, and we believe that Jewish people got on a boat and came to America. Kind of, like, in how they say that, like, it kind of makes to light some beliefs, but it also, like you said, like, makes you think about, not necessarily that one in particular, but just in general how some of the things you believe don't necessarily make the most sense. And so I think I think there's an attraction to religion because it's so mysterious and you don't really, it doesn't make sense, but yet it's fascinating. And I think this kind of stuff happens a lot in culture.
I mean, one thing that I did was when I actually listened to the musical was, some of the songs, again, I think the writers did a really good job of telling the history of Mormonism to a large audience. And so it kind of made me say, I wanted to know more about Mormonism because, again, these are people who, live in our world. And so I actually did some research, and I want to know what do they believe in, and what are the things that they particularly do, and how are some of the things correlate to, say, our Christianity, or it's a form of Christianity, right? No, okay. Anyway, but again, it's something that I just made me more interested about that because I think understanding what people believe is a great way to build connections among all worldly things.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a friend growing up in high school that was Mormon, so, and then I also had a girlfriend who, when I had met her, she was converting to Mormonism. So I had a pretty good sense of Mormonism and practices, and I went to her baptism, but I could go to other aspects of the rest of it, but. And I'd also watched a special at one point on YouTube, it was like an investigative report about Mormonism and inside the rituals. And so I had a pretty good working reference and knowledge of Mormonism going into it. And I haven't read the Book of Mormon. I tried when I was a kid. I remember having a Book of Mormon and starting to run through it and realizing that I could barely read the Bible, let alone this book that had no other kind of interpretation or translation, or I had no idea what it was talking about. So, It's a very difficult book, I think, just to pick up and read. And I think for me, sometimes I forget that my scripture is the same way, and I just expect people to be able to pick up and read it. But it is difficult. It is like a foreign language if you just pick it up and start reading it, especially when you start reading some of the passages in it, like this is awfully violent, or well, how am I reading about these kings, and why is Numbers full of genealogies? What does this matter?
It also helps me though when I think of like, okay, the nautical technologies at the time. There's no way these Hebrews got to America, or did Jesus go to America? Like, it's easy to come up with these critiques like this, but then it also makes me reflect of being like, okay, well we have like people can make the exact same things about our Christianity.
Trinity.
Yeah, the Trinity, or like really virgin birth.
Yeah.
Things like that. So it really helps me to check myself.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's a lot easier to criticize. It's a lot easier to be more accepting of religions that are so far different from Christianity, maybe, rather than if it's somebody you're competing directly against about your interpretation of what you believe. So there's just competing denominations. Sometimes I feel like it's easier to argue with them.
So one thing I've always liked about my friends growing up that were LDS and going to a lot of church with them or to Utah to see more about it is they're so willing to tell you things. And I guess this is maybe making fun of that a little bit too, but as growing up, I felt like Christianity, like the church I was brought up in, it was like you're supposed to know somehow everything that's in the Bible, and you're just like going to Sunday school is supposed to just seep in somehow. Whereas like these other friends would be like, well, do you know what a prophet is, or do you know what? Like they're so willing to explain every single step to you, and I thought, wow, that's not how my church feels, and that's so welcoming. But then sometimes I'd question a lot of well, why can't women do that, or why can't? And I mean, they would have answers for everything, but sometimes I would be like, well, I wonder if I ask those same questions. I don't feel comfortable asking questions in my own religion. I felt like, why is that? And it made me think a lot deeper.
I think the one thing that I've noticed a difference between like my Mormon friend that I knew and Christianity that I was brought up in is their narrative and what they talked about was much different than the overarching belief, if that makes sense. Like, what they believe is much different than what I was told about Mormonism. So, like, you know, if you look at their, you know, stuff like getting your own planet when you die, I don't remember my friend ever talking about that when he was walking me through being Mormon, you know? Like, that was never something they talked about. They didn't talk about the 3 levels of terrestrial and celestial and that stuff. But when I talked about Christianity, like, I felt like we talked about the major belief things. Like, we didn't hide away from, yeah, we believe Jesus died and we think he rose from the dead. Like, and we don't think of it as, well, and obviously there's strands of Christianity that do, but like what I was brought up in was, no, he physically rose from the dead. It wasn't like a spiritual thing, and he rose from the dead in the people, and that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, we talk about those weird intricacies about our faith, and I don't feel like they didn't explain to me that they had sacred underwear, you know? But it wasn't until later when my girlfriend was baptized Mormon and she had to wear those things when she went to the temple and stuff that I was like, oh, they kind of leave some of that stuff out.
We had to read a book for one of my youth ministry classes by Kendra Dean. She's a Methodist and she went to Princeton, or she teaches at Princeton. But she makes a statement about how every church is Mormon envy, because they have one of the most highly devoted youth and most knowledgeable youth running around, more so than any sect of Christianity otherwise. Just speaking to their credit, they educate and indoctrinate their youth a little better than some of us.
They definitely indoctrinate.
Yeah. Which I think that comes out of a history of being severely oppressed, not by just the society, but also the political establishment. Like, it was important for them as a community to you need to have these answers for when people ask you these questions. This is why. It's almost necessary for their survival.
I'm just saying, y'all need to man up. So.
Sounds like like it would be in like an Axe commercial, like body spray commercial or something. You know, like and then
It would that'd be
for the Old Spice or whatever.
either that or the bod.
Yeah. Or,
Those body spray commercials.
just remember, Nathan, that girl that you were talking about is probably more Mun than you will ever be.
Any other thoughts before we end our cultural text for tonight?
I think we should hear I think after you come back from the show, you should let us know.
Yeah,
about
we
it.
need an update.
Alright, so what's changed? Your view, like,
See if anything else stands out.
If you can go to lunch on that Saturday, because they're seeing it Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you
It's
go.
coming together.
There we go.
Puppies. Yeah.
Any prayer requests tonight? Pray about.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Oh, is it Anne at church, the lady that's in the nursery? She had a heart attack in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Who?
The lady, I
I don't know her last name. She's older lady.
She's an older lady. She takes care of the kids during like the church service. But she had a heart attack. She's been in the hospital. As my sisters were telling me, because like my nephews, they like her a lot, and so just for her and her family.
I think she finally got out of ICU like yesterday, but I think it was touch and go there for a little while.
I think we have a lot of people in this group that are traveling coming up, like have travels coming up, and prayers for that and change, transition, stress.
If you wouldn't mind praying for Wesley's sister, her name is Anna. She and her family, her immediate family, are going through some stuff. So if you just remember them.
All right.
Oh, and if it can be sunny at 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay. Done.
Think about it. I'll be looking at the sun.
Call Hermes, man.
Hermes.
And I'll have a backup plan if it's cloudy. It'll just be a really awkward moment with a bunch of 7-year-olds. We're like, well, we're gonna look at the sun.
You started Sunday, didn't you?
What?
About prayers.
Yeah. Well, as long as you say it in Jesus' name.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
It's
Then
fine.
obviously.
Yeah, they'll do it.
In your heavenly throne room. Or something.
Something like
What
that.
did you say?
Ja, ik kom kwijt met 2 minutes.
All right.
I think Cece's getting out of the hospital tomorrow,
Okay.
maybe, or at least that was the last
It should be coming to Memphis.
update I heard. So yeah, she hopefully, because she's been in the hospital. She's been in the hospital like 2.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time. So I think it was longer than expected. So I know she's ready to get out. So hopefully she can get out of the hospital.
I'm changing most of their shifts on Sunday at the 40th.
Oh, said she was gonna get out Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday tomorrow.
And this is the last time Drew will be with us for.
I know. Have fun. It's very
What
good
time is
here.
this on Skype? You can do it in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah, Scotland is about 6 hours ahead.
So Nick.
No.
That'd be good if we didn't hear you talk at 3
Cover that out, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Some prayers for Drew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna see him or talk to him for like 4 years.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be back at Christmas.
Yes! That's nice.
You come visit, free place to stay.
That's
It's
right.
just like Harry Potter.
Is it?
Just like
That's what you chose.
it's a lot more windy.
All right. Somebody pray for us, please.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
God, we just want to lift up all the requests made in this room, both spoken and unspoken, and pray that your will be done in all. Those traveling, those sick. Lord, we just pray your presence on this group throughout our week. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And real quick, next week,
Oh yeah.
we have two things. The last two, we have the book A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. We will be talking about that. We will also be discussing the movie A Diary of a Mad Black Woman.
Tyler Perry.
But Tyler Perry,
Yes.
Diary.
Tyler Perry's Diary of a Mad
Diary of a Mad Black Woman.
By the way, the heartbreaking work of staggering genius, it's like at the beginning of the book, he basically tells you to skip like 150 pages of it. So it's pretty awesome. He's like, don't read this. Actually, just start in chapter 6 and then move your way up to chapter 9.
Is that in the preface to
But
this
see, that's
edition?
that's when you want to read
Did you
those
get the
things.
UK edition?
I don't. There was not a note in the package. So yeah, try to read some of this if you can, the book, and watch the movie. Talk about it next week.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
See you.
Bye, everybody.
Happy Memorial Day.
Yay, get a day off school.
Yeah.